Welcome back to the Foundation in C# course. We're currently in Module 9. In this lesson, we're going to be covering the table room types. Okay? Now, I've chosen the room types table to be first because it has no dependencies on other tables. This is how you most easily develop a database. Create the tables that don't have dependencies first. For example, the bookings table has dependencies on guests, on room types, on rooms, and rooms have dependencies on room types. So therefore, we don't want to create the bookings first because we wouldn't have the ability to link to those other tables. So let's create the room types table first, which means your homework is to create a table that holds the room types. Now, we don't have a database. We don't have the project to create our database. So you're going to have to do all of that as well. Just a little hint. But create a table that holds the room types. Once you're done that, then come on back and watch me do it. So pause the video right here. All right, so I'm assuming that you are done now. So let's go over to Visual Studio and we'll create a new project. And I'm going to create, let's see, all project types and all languages. And we're going to actually search for SQL Server Database Project. All right, and that's what we're looking for is a SQL Server Database Project. We hit Next. And I'm going to call this the Hotel App DB. And the solution name will be Hotel App. All right, we're going to hit Create on this. And what it's going to do is create for us a SQL Server project, and inside here we're going to create a little bit of a structure. So folder DBO, and inside here I need a folder called tables. That's a basic enough structure to get us started. So let's create a new table and call it room types. And we have our ID, it's an integer, it's not null, it's a primary key. We'll mark this as identity, and that marks it as an auto increment value, meaning the first record will be 1, the next record will be 2, and so on. There may be gaps, and that's okay. We'll just never repeat a number, and we'll always go one higher than the previous ones at least. All right, so that's the identity row. Now, if you're looking at the data design, which you should be, mine is on the screen. You don't see the left-hand side of the screen. If you have that up, you'll notice you don't have an ID column. That's because ID is kind of like the default. It's standard. So we don't have to put that into our design, but we do need to think about it when we're building the actual database. Now, for some database types, ID is different. So in MongoDB, it's lowercase ID normally, and it's not an int, it's a GUID or a string. So there are differences. You can't just assume one type. But for our SQL, that's what we need. And we know we need that for every table. Now, according to our data design, we have a title. What type is that? Well, let's say nvarchar and 50 is fine. We don't want to allow nulls. Description. And let's say that is nvarchar, but instead of 50, let's say that is 2,000 characters. Again, not nullable. And we do want a price. Now for price, there's a few different options, but the one that works with SQL is money. So therefore, we'll leave that, and we'll not set that to be null either. Now, sometimes you're going to want a few extra, I call them housekeeping columns. For example, the date that this record was added, or the date that it was last modified, or if this record is active. We're not going to add those to this one, but I do want to point out that sometimes you'll have a few more of those type of columns. Because this is a minimum viable product, we're going to leave those off. We're not going to add those or a way to track those. We're just going to have these values, just enough to get going. Which means that we're now done. we have our database with our table design. We haven't published it yet, but that's okay. We've got our database. We've got our initial design for our table. Okay, so that's all we had to do for the first table.